Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalwarowsky, your very own crocodile hunter, survivor man, crossed with Elmer Fudd, and we'll get into that shortly. And I'm here with the yang to my yin, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
Really messing with my autopilot today, sir. I have to say, I am desperately curious to understand what the heck that change up was all about, but I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for asking. I'm so excited about our guest today. So let's go. Let's get this party started, shall we?
Yeah, well, I mean, the story, right, is I almost had to burn the entire house down. So I was putting the laundry out, and this huntsman spider, which they're about 3 to 4 inches, it literally like hops into the house.
I'm too
And
sensitive
so,
for this story, Rob.
well, so I went to go get like the dustpan and the broom so I could get it out of the house. And then it runs into one of the cabinets, and then I'm looking for it. It runs out, and then I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? And then it's on the counter.
Is this where the Elmer Fudd part comes in?
Yes. So I was chasing it, and then
Hunting
eventually
rabbit.
I got it. I got it out of the house. So we're still alive, hopefully.
All kinds of wild and crazy adventures down there living in Costa Rica. Hey, sir.
Yep, that's the game. But I was thinking of starting the show with that
Yeah.
the napalm joke from, or the napalm quote from Apocalypse Now, but I have a better quote. And it's from former head coach John Wooden, and he says,
My fave.
the most powerful leadership tool you have is your own personal example. And so, of course,
you love that one. Oh,
that's right.
that's our favorite thing to remind people of, right? The number one play in the Leadership 2.0 playbook. The model carries the most weight. I love it.
Absolutely. And we love that one. And obviously, we have a special guest with us, the president and CEO at Peak Demand, the host of the Deep Leadership podcast, and the author of You Have the Watch, I Have the Watch, and we're all in the same boat. Jon Rennie's with us. Jon, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Good to meet you guys. Good to be on the show.
Yeah, great to have you. Jon, what do you think of the quote?
Oh, I love it. I think that, especially all my years in leadership, I think that one of the things I notice is that people do emulate the leader. They do look to the leader, not by the words that they say, but the actions that they do. And so if you say everybody needs to be on time to meetings and you're always late, well, guess what? Always late is going to be the what happens.
The standard.
The standard. Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us and our audience a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from in this beautiful world of bars, and the mission that you're on in and around Peak Demand, the book you wrote. Catch us up to speed on you, Jon.
Sure. Yeah, how do I start? So I started out as an engineer. So I have a mechanical engineer like you, Rob. I got a mechanical engineering degree at Worcester Polytech, not MIT, but just down the road from where you went to school. And then I went in the Navy as a naval officer. So I was on the USS Tennessee for 5 years as a naval officer. I made 7 deployments during that time. And I came out, and like a lot of guys coming out of the military, I went into corporate America, essentially. And I worked for 3 global companies over 22 years, and I ran 8 manufacturing businesses for them over the years. So up and down the East Coast in the United States, I was running businesses with other people's money. And 8 years ago, I left corporate life, started my own manufacturing business here in North Carolina. I'm in Wilson, North Carolina with my company. We started it from scratch. We built a factory, built our products. We went to market, and we're doing our own thing. So it's smaller than the businesses I ran when I was with big corporations, but I love it. It's I get to practice true leadership in the way I wanted to practice leadership, which I struggle a little with my later corporate career, is that my values and the corporate values were not aligned, and so it was time for me to move on. So, and I love doing what I'm doing, and for about 10 years I've been writing on leadership topics. Because I've been a practitioner of leadership all those years. And I wrote 3 books, started a podcast 4 years ago that's gotten to be really popular. And I interview great practitioners, military veterans, entrepreneurs, researchers, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great journey through that process.
Amazing. Jon, I want to dig into what you said about practicing leadership like you want to versus what corporate America was having you do. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I've always believed in the power of people and the importance of people in an organization. So, I would say this: a ship without a crew is just a hunk of cold steel sitting in the harbor, right? It takes a crew to bring a ship to life, and it takes our people to bring our plans to life, our businesses to life. And what I found is that when I started in corporate work, is that my values and the values of the corporations were aligned. They believed in people, the power of people. But what I found over time is that I would say there was more focus on the profits than the people. And the other thing too was the amount of authority that we were given as general managers, vice presidents went away. Every year, it seemed like more and more authority was stripped from us. So we had all the responsibility without the authority. And I think that was a very difficult thing because I wasn't allowed to hire and fire and promote and to pay what I wanted to. I had to follow the corporate edicts. If you see a lot of times in these corporations where there's this curve that you have to rate people on, and you can only give raises. You have a certain amount of people that are your top performers, and your numbers have to always match, and you have to do a review with HR before you present it to. But what if I've recruited a really amazing team that's killing it and we're crushing our numbers? So you have to follow the same distribution as everybody else. It really bothered me. And so, like I said, there was a value misalignment between what I believed is the right way to run a business and what they wanted me to do. So I think that's where it was finally like, I was at my final corporate gig for 3 years, and I just said, I think I'm done with this. I think it's time for me to go. So, yeah.
We talked a little bit about this with Gary Ryan a few days ago. Why do you think they're stripping away authority and decision making from the levels that should be appropriate to make the decisions?
So I think it's a matter of control and concerns with. So again, leadership is a people business. Running these businesses, it's about people, and I think that they want to make sure. See, when it comes to leadership, I think failure is a big part of our success, right? We have to make mistakes. We have to let our people make mistakes to be able to grow, to be able to learn, to be able to get better. But I think in terms of these big corporations who are responsible to their shareholders, they don't want mistakes, right? So they can't tolerate anyone kind of slipping off whatever they've told, the investors or the markets and what have you. So I think that they really want to tightly control everything so that there's no surprises. And so I had a great conversation with a friend of mine who runs Amazon facilities, and he says, and I was talking about how I believe we should be more entrepreneurial in our approach to leadership, is that we got to give a lot more control to our people. And he says, when we build a Amazon distribution, we hire 5,000 people. Those 5,000 people better follow the rules, because these are rules that we've learned over time that have been successful. So I can see the point of view of corporations wanting to have people follow the rules because there won't be any surprises, and they've learned these lessons globally. But it is hard for human beings to be tightly controlled. We're not really successful when someone tells us everything that we have to do in our jobs. And for me, especially, I could not operate that way.
Does it happen like that in the military? Because I feel like for us laymen or civilians, I guess would be the right terminology in this context, right? Is like that typically is what maybe we would associate with that style of leadership. But you're saying that this fundamentally was out of alignment with your values, right? So I'm curious in terms of because we've interviewed so many amazing leaders on this show who, like you, came from serving in the military. You said that's a very common trajectory, right? Coming out of the military and transitioning into corporate America. So I'm just curious if you could speak to a little bit of what you learned experientially about leadership in your time in the military.
I think the one thing about the leadership in the military that translates well to business is that they teach it. They actually teach leadership in the military. And the other thing
Ding,
is,
ding, ding.
yes, I know, right?
Concept.
It's a crazy thing.
Yeah, what a novel concept. Exactly.
So they teach it, they train it. And the other thing is you learn, you start in the beginning, every one of your, whether you're enlisted or you're an officer, you start with no responsibility. You're responsible for yourself. And over time, you're given more and more responsibility to the point when you've been in the military service for 20 years, you've gone from leading 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 to 600 to 1,000 people. You are learning and developing your leadership skills always along the way. And so 1 is we train, 2 is we give you practice. And so what I found in corporate, my time in corporate, was there's no training, and if there is, you might get watch this video or what have you. It's very limited. And the second thing is that we don't give people the opportunities to lead at a lower level before they move up. So we take the best engineer, we make them the engineering manager. Well, you might be a great engineer, you might be a great individual contributor, but where have you had a chance to practice leadership skills? And so I think that's where we sort of miss out in corporate. So I do a lot of training with, I come in and do leadership sessions with MBA students. And one of the things that surprises me is that their leadership is not one of the courses they take in MBA. And maybe it's getting better now, but a lot of times I talk to students and said, how many leadership courses have you taken in your MBA program? And they say, you're the first one. and it's shocking because they learn accounting and marketing and operations, but leadership is really where it's at.
So why is that such a blind spot here in 2023, Jon? It makes no sense to us sitting on this podcast, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts in terms of why we're still missing the mark in such a big way?
Because we don't see leadership as a true skill set. We see it as an add-on, right? You're a good engineer, we're going to make you a leader. You're a good quality inspector, we're going to make you the quality manager. You're a good salesman, we're going to make you the sales manager. We don't see that the role of leader is a whole set of different skills that takes a lifetime to master. And so you want to find the people that actually have the desire and the skills to actually lead people. And I think that's where we miss out. We treat it as a plug-in, an add-on, and not a serious set of skills like accounting, or like it's the soft, right? And the quote that I love, and I can't remember who said it, but it says the soft things are the hard things. And I think that we don't take it as serious as we should.
I'm curious, Jon, like obviously we talk a lot about skills on this show, but like what are some of the top leadership skills that folks need to learn?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe I'll go right into to what I see is the definition of leadership, right? And that is to motivate a group of people to achieve a goal, right? I'll just boil it down to the simple things, right? And it's just, I always say that leadership is like chess. It takes maybe a week to learn, but it takes a lifetime to master. And I think, but we miss out on the fundamentals sometimes. We think what leadership is not is to-do list or meetings and trying to get your emails to zero. That is not leadership. Leadership is about motivating people to achieve a goal. So what does that mean? Well, it's about finding the right people, hiring them properly, understanding them, knowing what their goals are, what they want to do in their lives, right? And making sure they're plugged into the right roles in your company, motivating them properly, which means communicating, getting to know them, what do they want to achieve in their lives, and how does that fit within the organization, right? And then and the goal, right? And this is the one thing that's really I found interesting in corporate is that there were so many goals, right? There was not one goal. We didn't know what the goal was. What was environmental? It was quality. It was customer service. It was and all this stuff came at you all the time. And so, but one of the things that I was able to do as a leader, and I think need to do that, is to get it down to where here's what I want you. Here's what we're gonna do this year. Here's the goal, right? And make it really clear and make it easy to understand. I think that's those skills, right? Of just really identifying the right people, bringing them in your organization, putting them in the right place, and then the motivation. How do you get these people excited about carrying out the mission, and then actually understanding the goals of the organization and putting it in a way that people can understand it? You do those three things pretty well, you're going to do well as a leader.
Yes, you are. I'm curious how this compares and contrasts to deep leadership. Is this the same thing? Is it synonymous? I mean, it is the title of your podcast, after all.
Well, how can a submariner write or start a leadership podcast that doesn't have the word deep in it, right?
Oh, I get it now.
Deep leadership is a little play on my life underneath the ocean and where I learned a lot of these leadership skills. But yeah, I think it really goes back to what I was saying earlier about leadership is a lifelong process to be able to learn. So we go shallow in leadership a lot. So we learn some basic skills. Maybe we go to a week-long training. Maybe we watch a video. We go to a seminar. We learn some basic skills. But really, leadership, becoming a great leader takes a lifetime. And so what we try to do on the show is to bring in guests that are going to dive deep in different areas of leadership that maybe you hadn't considered. And so the show is a half hour long, and we give people this nugget of information, but we always encourage them to dive deeper in that subject. If it's something that really excites them or motivates them, we encourage them go deep in that one, because we're all at different places on our leadership journey, and so we all need a certain message at a certain time. So that's why I try to put out as many different topics on leadership as possible, so that people kind of say, "Oh, that's exactly what I needed for the point in my career that I'm at."
I love it. And Jon, like with your books, you start like you have all in the same boat. I have the watch, you have the watch. It feels like there's very much a progression with them. Do you want to tell us a little bit about like what's your progression been as you've written those books, and like what's changed in your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the All in the Same Boat was my second book, but it was the book I wanted to write. I think some of us have a book in our head that we want to get out. And, I did for years. And I actually hired a writing coach who said to me, he said, "Don't write that book." And I was like, "What do you mean don't write the book? I hired you to tell me to teach me or show me how to write this book." He said, "Don't write the book." He said, "I want you to write another book first and learn how to write a book before you write the book that you have." And so he was the one encouraging me to write I Have the Watch, which was basically, I had written about 10 years worth of, for 10 years, I've been writing for various websites and writing my own blog. And he's like, "You have so much amazing content. Let's bring that into its own book." And so you learn the process of writing, editing, marketing, all that. So I Have the Watch is 22 short stories of leadership lessons, specifically around leading people, specifically around motivating people and those three things I talked about: people, motivating people to achieve a goal. They're all really wrapped around that. And so that is actually still my most popular book today. People love that book. And it was funny because it was more of a challenge by my leadership coach to say, "You need to write this book." All in the Same Boat is the book I wanted to write. It's 50 stories from my time under the ocean and how I applied those lessons in leading businesses over the years. So it's really taking those, if you're interested in submarines and you're interested in what people do under the ocean, buy that second book, because it's really lots of what I call sea stories and then I bring that into how did I apply that into the business world. So that's what that story is. And You Have the Watch is actually it's a journal. It's a working journal for people who like that first book to be able to. It takes you through a year-long process of going through 50 key leadership traits. And so you take it, you're supposed to do every day for a year, and you go through it. So it's more of a workbook to the first book.
Let's whet our audience's palate here, our appetite a little bit. What are the top 3 lessons from those books that you feel like our audience would most benefit from hearing from you today?
Well, you already heard the first one, which is the definition of leadership. That and just getting back to that. So that would be the biggest tip.
Motivating people to achieve a goal. Folks.
Absolutely. Don't forget about the basics. Don't get too tied up in your daily routine that you forget about those 3 things. The other thing I would say is don't be a nub. And what is a nub? Well, on a submarine, a nub is a non-useful body. Okay. It meant that you were not qualified as a submariner yet. So once you get on board, it takes about a year before you're fully qualified in every area of the submarine. And up until that point, you are stealing oxygen and food from people who are actually qualified to do their job. So as a leader, you must be competent in your craft. Okay. So you can't just say, "Well, I'm a new general manager. I'm an expert in operations, but I don't know anything about sales and marketing." Well, you better learn about sales and marketing. You better get up to speed. So where you're weak, you better become strong. So don't be a nub, don't be a non-useful body. Learn your craft, get skilled, be competent in your craft. So that's one lesson I would say. And the other thing that I talk about in the books, and I think I'll throw it out there. There's a lot of great stuff in the books, but I'll throw this one out that is something that's been really valuable to me over the years, and that is to listen to your introverts. And we tend to avoid the introverts because they are quiet while other people are talking. And I've always found the best ideas, or the most the out of the box ideas, are coming from my introverts who are thinking while other people are talking. And so I just would encourage leaders, if you're in meetings and you've got a quiet person, give them the opportunity to express their ideas, because I think introverts are interesting people. And maybe because I'm an engineer, and I think maybe I started out as a little bit more introverted, that I just find introverts interesting. And so I do tend to find their input very valuable. So that's another tip I'd give you.
I've worked with a few folks like that too, and they're pretty amazing. Jon, I'm curious, like, as you now at Peak Demand, when you promote folks into a leadership role, or like, what does that training and that process look like as you're moving folks from, individual contributor to supervisor to manager?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a great question. I am really looking for, what's interesting is we tend to take our best individual contributor to make them leaders. And I do the opposite. I actually look for leadership skills, and I look for natural leadership skills. People who are volunteering, let me do that, or I'll take that, or I'm looking for the people that are stepping up, and I also looking for the people that you go in a room, you know who the leader is naturally. So who is everybody looking at? Who is everybody listening to? Those are typically leaders. They're influencers, right? So I want to find those people that have those, that spark of leadership in them, right? And then I want to give them smaller opportunities. And again, just similar to the military, give them opportunities to learn leadership in a smaller scale, and then move to a greater scale. And I would say the other thing is I give them opportunities to have what I call controlled failure, which means putting them in a role maybe that might be a stretch assignment for them, but also being there to protect them if things go wrong. I'm there to help them, coach them up, and help them get better. So, because I really truly believe that failure is a big important part of how we learn to be a leader, and we have to have someone above us that's willing to allow us to make mistakes as we're trying to figure out and learn the process. Failure is a very emotional feeling that we get when we fail. We don't want to do it again. So we learn lessons. We learn deep lessons when we fail. And so I want those failures to happen with our young leaders, so that they get a chance to feel uncomfortable and learn from those lessons, and try not to repeat those going forward. So a little bit of what I do here.
How about for you, sir? What about the failures that you experienced early on in your leadership development? Do you have any stories about any of those failures, and maybe the lessons that they helped you learn early on in your career?
Oh, sure. I have one in my first book, which talks about when I was a young engineer. When I came out of the military, I was an engineer. We were designing a product that had never been, and a technology that had never been done before. And I was the lead mechanical engineer on this big project. I was responsible for all the testing, all the mechanical structure, and how we built this thing. And we went to the test lab, and the whole purpose of this product was to, if there was an electrical fault, it would contain the fault within the confines of this gear, and it would only release any gases up the top. So if anybody was walking by this piece of electrical equipment, they wouldn't be injured. So it was basically an explosion-proof type of thing. No one had ever done it before in this type of gear. So we were trying to be first to the market. It was a very visible project, lots of millions and millions of dollars being spent on this product development. We went to the test lab, first test. They applied the 15,000 volts and a fault across this cabinet, and when it hit, this entire product blew up, pieces everywhere. I mean, there was nothing left. It was I remember going out to the test bay after everything was safe, and I could see just melted steel, melted copper, and the smell of burnt everything. And I just imagined that was my career. I literally just thought, it's done. I'm over. I failed. I've completely
Up in smoke.
Yeah, up in smoke. And I remember calling my boss, and I was really nervous. It's like I'm going to the gallows here. I'm gonna get fired. And he asked me two questions. He said, "Do you know what happened?" And I knew right away why the failure mode. Right as soon as it happened, I knew exactly what we did wrong. I said yes, and he said, "Can you fix it?" I said yes, and he said, "Get back here. Let's get the redesign done. And let's get back to the lab." And I knew that leader took a lot of heat for that failure. We spent a lot of money. We didn't get any results, but he never let me feel any of the heat. He took the blame, and he encouraged me and the rest of the engineers to get back to redesign. And we did. And 1 month later, we came back. We passed the test. We achieved all these different patents that had never been done before. We were the leading supplier in the market. We made millions of dollars on this product over its lifetime. So they still produce it today. And they did it because one leader didn't give up on their person. One leader had my back. And I think that's a lesson I really learned. It's really important that sometimes we make mistakes, that good people will make mistakes when they're doing things that have never been done before. And so do you have the ability to let them have a mistake and have that learning? And then do you protect them? Or do you say, I fired him, so you're trying to protect your own career, right? And he could have done that. He could have fired me to protect his own back, but he had my back. Yeah.
That's such a great story.
I love that story.
And yeah, it's so true, right? Like I talk a lot about bad bosses, and a lot of the elements that are in these toxic cultures, right, is taking credit and avoiding blame.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very common for leaders to do the inverse of what happened for you. So you had a great boss, and you're lucky.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great guy. And we're talking nearly 30 years later, and I still remember that story like it was yesterday. And I'll still tell it like it was yesterday. I tell that story to a lot of college students too, because I think it's one that I want them, because it does resonate. And if you feel the emotional tug to that, and I want them to realize what it means to be a person that has a boss that cares deeply enough to give them, let them fail and let them learn. And sometimes it's hard, because it means that he took a lot of heat, I'm sure, but he never even mentioned it to me at all. I never heard one word about it.
I love it. Now, Jon, I want to ask you a little bit about the pod. So you've had, at this point, you've released 242 episodes. What are some of the leadership lessons you've learned from your guests?
Yeah, I think one that was a little surprising to me. I've always thought of myself as a servant leader. I thought that was what I was. And I had several guests on talking about transformational leadership, and I recognized that, wow, I've not been a servant leader. I've actually been a transformational leader, and understanding what transformational leadership has been really interesting to me. It's been an interesting part of my learning through the podcast, and really. Whereas servant leadership puts employees first, right? And you make sure you have the employees have what they need to be successful. You care for them deeply. And the thought is, if you do all these things, then the goals will be achieved in the company. Whereas transformational leadership is really looking at transforming people to be able to bring their best to work in the achievement of the business goals. And when I look at throughout my career, that's really what I was always doing, was growing people and growing businesses, and trying to bring the two together. And so the difference between, I think, servant leadership maybe and transformational leadership is the word and. So in transformational leadership, it's the people and the goals and the mission. And I think the and is the connecting point. And I think that I learned that over the past 4 years, that I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm not a servant leader. I mean, yes, I think transformational leadership has servant leader characteristics, but I think the and is really important there. So that was one that I picked up. The other one I mentioned a little bit about when I said don't be a nub is that leaders need to be competent. So we think of leaders, you need to be authentic, you need to be transparent, so we get all these the leaders need to be X, Y, and Z. But I would say this is, you need to be competent. You need to be good at your craft. Here's the deal: on a submarine at sea, when things get bad, what do? We look to the captain. Does he understand what's going on? Does he have control? we're worried that if we have a captain that's panicking when things go bad, we're all going to panic, right? So you got to be competent in your craft, and I think that that's an important thing that I also realize, that we say leaders need to be X, Y, and Z, but really important is competent. You have to be competent in being your role as a leader, because people are going to look to you, and you might be doing everything else right, but if you're not competent in what you're doing, people aren't going to follow you. I think the last thing probably is I think that really I realized through several of my guests is that we rely way too much on written communication. And written communication is always going to be misunderstood, just because of the way we are as humans. And I think even now more than ever, we're relying on written communication. So as people are working remotely, there's more emails, there's more text messages. And so we often miscommunicate when we use writing in our leadership journey. So I do highly recommend people do face-to-face. Even if people are working remotely, you can get on a Zoom call, you have a quick face-to-face, and you learn so much more when you communicate face-to-face.
Leadership 2.0, right, buddy? It's all about the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that last. It's funny. My entire career, I always felt like if they were in the same building, I would go and walk to see if I had attachment or whatever, like I would send them the file and then I would go to their desk. And my last job, the guy literally sat behind me. Like it was like he's less than 6 feet away, and he would ping me on Teams chat, and I would just turn around and be like, "Hey, what's up?"
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. And again, if I go back to introverts, I think introverts tend to want to communicate with it in writing because they can make sure it's all perfect before they press send. But I think we miss the deeper connection when we don't have a face-to-face. So I think we got to be careful not to rely too much on text messages. So I mean, it's face-to-face here, it's voice here. So if you're just doing a phone call, it's there, but written communication is way below that in terms of the quality of communication. So I think leaders who rely too much on the written communication are going to miss out on really connecting with their people.
What would you say to the leader that's listening who finds themselves all of a sudden thrust into a leadership role without any leadership training, since we're identifying this gap that exists, right, in big business, where the average leader doesn't even receive formal training from their company until 42 or 10 years on in a leadership role, right? So you're saying it's all about competence, but if I can only imagine for the leader that's listening right now, that's identifying that they're in that gap, right? What would your advice to them be?
So what's great is in the military, it was a great opportunity for us because they took young people and they put them in roles where you had people working for you that were older than you and more experienced than you are. So when I first showed up to the ship, I had the reactor controls department, which was filled with senior enlisted operators that had made multiple deployments. They were very skilled in their craft, and I learned very quickly that I was the biggest liability on our team was the leader. And I think that many leaders find themselves in those positions where the people around them are older and more experienced, right? And so how do you be a successful leader? How do you be competent when you're in that position? I would say this. One of the things I do when I come into a new business is I try to meet with as many people as possible. So having a chance to run 8 different businesses, I had a chance to do this on multiple occasions, which is I come in and I meet with as many people as possible. I try to meet with everyone. Sometimes that's not possible, but I ask them 3 questions. And I think this really helps you get a feel for the organization and get a feel for where the challenges are. I ask them what's working well here. And usually that's a small list. And then I say, what's not working well here? And that's typically a longer list, right? Yeah. But then I'll say, if you were in my shoes, what would be the first thing you would do? And what was interesting about those conversations is that you end up, and I actually put them in a spreadsheet because I'm an engineer and I like data. So I'll put them in a spreadsheet and I end up finding out that these things they typically, correlate around 3 different main themes that need to be addressed. And what I try to do is do one thing on that list that is kind of a low risk, but it makes a lot of impact right away. And the reason I do it is I want them to know that I'm listening and I'm also going to take action on their ideas. But if you're inexperienced or you're coming into a business new, this will give you a great place to begin to understand the business from a multiple different perspectives. And I think that's where I find it's really good. I see the engineers hate everybody in marketing. Marketing hates everybody in sales. Sales hates this. So you start seeing the whole picture, and you can start seeing the connection and the connection points. And I think and you actually get to know people too. You understand where their histories are and their frustrations are. So I think it really is a good thing for early on in a leader coming into a new role to do that, because then you end up having this, and do it one-on-one, not in public, one-on-one, and you get those private conversations. So you really get to know your people then, and then you can build those relationships as you continue forward. But that's one way to it's the cheat code to when you're new to an organization, to learn it quickly.
The reconnaissance mission.
Yes,
right?
recon. Absolutely.
You go out on the recon mission and you get all those data points from your people. Oh my gosh, what a great freaking mindset strategy that is.
I love it. Jon, we got to ask you the heavy hitter question.
Oh, yeah.
With all your work that you're doing in leadership, what do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, I think I love this idea that that leaders leave ripples, and it's like a pebble going into a lake, right? We leave ripples that go out from us. So, like I mentioned, the story of my boss when I was an engineer, right? That person left a positive ripple in my life that affected how I lead people from the rest of my life, right? 30 years later, I'm still remembering that lesson, right? So the question is, what kind of ripples are you leaving as you go through your journey? What's the impact you're making on people's lives, right? Are you, like some leaders where everything behind them in their wake is a disaster, right? They're looking for short-term results. So and believe me, I ran into many of those people that would burn bridges, they'd fire people, they'd do whatever it took just to make their bonus check. Right. So what kind of impact are you making in the world? What are the ripples that you're making? So for me, I want to leave positive ripples everywhere I go, where people say, you know what? And I've had many people tell me this, and it blows my mind when I hear it. But I want people to remember me as one of the best bosses they've ever worked for, and when they tell me that, I always ask the question, why, and it's always interesting to hear, but it's always different for every person. I remember one person, she said, "You're the best boss I've ever worked for." She was an older lady. And I said, "I can't believe it, because you've had many bosses throughout your career." And she said, "You say, please, thank you, and you smile a lot." And I'm like, is that what it took to be a great boss? It's scary, because that person, that meant that she never had someone doing that over all the course of her career, which is sad. Which is absolutely sad. So what I would say is that we are going to leave an impact in the world as leaders. People are going to be affected by us. Let's leave a positive legacy. Let's leave a positive impact on people's lives.
They're not always going to remember what you teach them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Absolutely. It's so true. So
freaking true.
Yeah.
It is like, one is we're all about the ripple effect on this show, but it's also something that we see a lot. And the stats actually back it up, Jon, is like 65% of the workforce works for a bad boss right now.
Yeah.
And so we're talking, folks, like it's not that many that you would have. Like, it's pretty statistically likely you're going to string a few together. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there for sure. And I love what you're doing. Absolutely love what you're doing. I love the engineering approach of the spreadsheet and all the problems. It's something that I've learned a lot in. I used to do similar ideas too. Now it's a little bit different, but
yeah, I think the other thing, where spreadsheets good, and I encourage people to do it. If you're so some of us are more empathetic than others, and sometimes in certain fields, maybe accounting, engineering, more numbers based, we're a little less empathetic. And you can, I hate to say the word fake, but you may need something to help you be more empathetic. And I have used spreadsheets to be able to, like, I have a spreadsheet on all my employees, everything about their kids' names, their birthdays, what their likes, their dislikes. And I know people think, well, that's kind of creepy. It's like, no, I need that. I need to remember, if I'm going out on the shop floor and I know Susan's going to be there, I go there and I look, I'm like, okay, Susan's got, okay, right. And so I remember something about Susan so that I make a personal connection. Now, maybe that's a little fake, But I think sometimes some of us have that natural ability to remember everything about people's, but if you don't have that, use a tool to be able to have that personal connection with somebody.
I love
Great
that
advice.
tip. That's a great tip. And one of my other leaders, he built a spreadsheet with like some of the personal details along with like where their stretch goals are and the development ideas that he has for each of them. And so you can really break this down. I mean, obviously you have to be someone who likes
Spreadsheets.
the spreadsheet and the way of that, but there's a lot of ways you can be creative to help your folks on that journey, regardless of what tool you use. So I love that tool. That's amazing. For folks out there, if you want to find more about Jon or connect with Jon, one is wherever you're listening to this show, head on over, Google Deep Leadership, hit subscribe. That'll be there. Also, you can head on over to LinkedIn. Jon Scott Rennie is his handle. I dropped it in the podcast notes. You can head over to jonsrennie.com to find all the books, also the pod and all the other things that Jon's doing. It's all there as well. And if you're looking for large mechanical electrical equipment, peakdemand.com. Jon, I do have a fair amount of my folks are in heavy industry.
That's
right. Great.
They actually may be looking for these things. But yeah, peakdemand.com for all of that. Jon, is there anywhere else you want folks to find and follow you?
No, yeah, go to jonsrennie.com. That has everything there. And they're actually, I've packaged the 3 books. I call it the Qualified Leadership Series. So you can buy all 3 books right now as a package discount. So those people that are interested, like, hey, I like this guy, and you want to get all 3 books cheaper. So we call it the Qualified Leadership Series, and it's kind of reflected on what we talked about. You need to be qualified. You need to be competent at what you do. So get those 3 books, become competent.
I mean, what was the option? Be competent or stop eating and breathing?
Don't be a nub.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what it was.
Obviously, for folks out there, hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad Project on your favorite podcast platform and drop us a rating and review. And for all your one-on-one high-performance leadership mindset, your leadership development programs, conflict management, EQ, and more, head on over to elitehighperformance.com. Susan, is there anything you want to leave our folks with today?
I knew your well was going to run deep with all that sage wisdom, Jon. And I'm just so grateful that you brought this to our audience. There are some really actionable strategies buried in this interview. So as if that's not enough, make sure to get out and get the trilogy so that we can really help to close this gap in our leadership development world, right? What an incredible resource those books and this interview will be for our audience. So thank you, Jon, for coming in today.
Absolutely. I loved it. Love meeting you guys. And thank you for what you're doing on this podcast.
Thank you. And for me, I think the biggest thing that I want folks to take away is competency. Right. And we often think that leadership is this, there's always this debate. Is it just something you're born with? Or is it something you develop? Right. And there's not a lot of boss babies that are coming out of the womb. But there are skills that you can learn, regardless if you're like a great orator or like these things that, naturally empathetic or whatever these things, there are skills you can learn. Jon was mentioning them. We teach them. Jon teaches them. There's a lot of folks out there that teach these skills and you can learn them. So don't sit there and feel like you're powerless if you're not good at conflict or having hard conversations or, being emotionally intelligent. You can learn that stuff. So get out there, get learning. Jon, thank you so much for joining us this week. Everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.